Okay. So we're here with Judge Kevin Dougherty. He's meeting with the LNP Editorial Board, a slimmed down version of it via Google Hangouts. And you are in your campaign office where?
In northeast section of Philadelphia.
Okay, well, welcome, Judge Donahue. And we will introduce ourselves, and then we'll let you introduce yourself and tell us what voters should know about you.
Hi, I'm Doreen Bethea, Associate Editor, LNP Editorial Board.
Joe Hinteller, Deputy Opinion Editor for LNP.
Hi, I'm Kevin Dougherty, and I'm currently a candidate for one of the 3 vacancies in Pennsylvania. Shall I continue?
Yes, please. Tell us about yourself and what voters should know about you.
Oh, okay. Well, first and foremost, I am a resident in the city and county of Philadelphia, where I currently serve as the administrative judge of the Court of Common Pleas Trial Division. As you know, my system is the largest in the state, and we are probably the 5th largest in the country. I've served in this capacity since December of 14. Prior to that, I have been a judge since 2001. I guess in order for people to understand why I want to become a Supreme Court justice, you need to know a little bit about who I am and where I'm from. As I indicated, I am born in this city and county, and I grew up in a very blue-collar, working-class neighborhood. Growing up in my neighborhood, many of the parents were either in law enforcement or firefighters, or they worked in the labor positions, very blue collar, as I indicated. When I was growing up, education was valued, but employment was essential. I didn't have the good fortune of having doctors and lawyers as my neighbors. As such, I am the first in my family to actually go to college and complete it. I attended Temple University, and I was a commuter student because I had to commute via public transportation every day so that I could get off our subway system and have a night and on the weekends. I needed to work at my maximum. I had 3 part-time jobs in order to keep me economically supplied to pay my student loans and purchase the books. First time I ever left my county was to go to law school, and I went to law school in Washington, D.C. It was a public interest law school because that's where I've always dedicated my resources as well as my heart. Coming back from law school, I worked as an assistant district attorney in the city and county of Philadelphia. I started out in what was known as our municipal court, which is analogous to your municipal district judges. I worked there, and I ended up leaving after trying many jury trials in the major jury trial criminal division. Thereafter, I entered private practice. I served as a family lawyer and a criminal defense attorney for approximately until being elected both by Democrats and Republicans and please John. After my primary victory, in which I came in number 1 on both sides of the tickets, which is interesting. After I won the primary, it was in June that then Governor Tom Ridge appointed me to a vacancy on that bench pending the general election in November. While most people assumed I was going to the criminal branch as a result of my years as a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, I requested to serve in family court. The reason being that my dad was a court officer in family court for 36 years. So as a young child, when we had off from school, I would often go to work with him and sit in the back of the room. And as I've said previously, what I would see in that courtroom was actual miracles happening. What I was able to witness, even in my youth, were individuals, mostly the at-risk, the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. And I was able to see bad situations corrected. It's something that kind of had a profound impact on me. As I said, growing up in a very blue-collar neighborhood, I witnessed where parents will get injured on their job. And it may be a catastrophic injury, may not. but the ultimate results were always catastrophic in the sense they would lose their job, and as a result, they couldn't pay the mortgage. And I saw many of my friends lose their homes or be embarrassed because their parents needed to resort to public assistance, yet never realizing that public assistance is a helping hand to get you back on your feet. So with that in mind, I thought that would be the best place that I can serve. And I was fortunate to be granted that option. And I worked my way from 2001 to 2003, at which time I was appointed the supervising judge of the juvenile division, which meant I had to work with all my judges and the administrative judge, who is the boss of family court. It wasn't until 2005 that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court appointed me as the administrative judge. My order initially read for 3 years or at the will of the court. And I had the good fortune of serving close to 10 years as the head of the court. The reason I think that was a blessing is, as the head of the court, I was able to help direct the policy and make the necessary changes that I thought were appropriate, so that I created a level playing field for everybody who came into my courthouse. Administrative judge, I was the supervisor judges, 2 courthouses and approximately 8, a very court congested calendar. And I would sit anywhere from 25 juvenile cases and maybe 25 reviews, in which in Pennsylvania, we bring our children back regularly to see how they're progressing through the system. The beauty of my system was, and as the head, I was able to develop some policies. For example, I used to say to most people that in my city, many of the children, 85% of the children who come into my courthouse were children of color. And what I would realize is that I could not control how the police made arrests on the street, but I could control the process as to how they were treated in our court. For example, most people don't realize in Pennsylvania, if you're underage drinking, that is a summary offense, which is the court does not have jurisdiction. You would pay a $300 fine, go to a class, and you ultimately can have your record expunged. So if you were arrested for a small personal amount of marijuana, you were arrested, detained, strip searched, fingerprinted, photographed. And when we looked at the disproportionate minority contact, what I was finding in my city was that the majority of children who were cited, or young people who were cited for underage drinking, were primarily white males in college, and yet some of our African-American youth, 15, 16 years old, were being arrested for the marijuana. Both are illegal for minors. So what I was able to do was create a system in which we treated each child equally, despite the fact that I didn't have jurisdiction over the underage drinking. And that was able to permit individuals an opportunity to succeed. Now, don't get me wrong. My job was and will always be to separate the good kid or person who got caught up in a bad way, and separate that person from a child or a person that needs to be removed from a civilized society because of their behavior. But no matter what choice I make, the court's position is and will always be, let's do what's right to reform, rehabilitate, and try to get this person, in my case, or my years of experience, children and young adults, let's get them on the right track. I'm a firm believer that education really is a vaccine against violence. And far too often, my school system would give a free education, but not an appropriate education. So if I were to remove a child from the family, I want to make sure that that child had a holistic approach at mental health treatment, physical well-being, but more so education, making sure that we developed the necessary tests to see what that child needed. See, what people also don't realize is that the court system is a place where good things happen, and millions of dollars are always placed into the system for court-involved programs. The question is, are we getting a return on our investment? My position as the head of the court was to make sure that the programs were not only culturally competent, but were competent, and that that the necessary programs would meet the needs of the child and the family in a holistic approach. In my quest to do that, I was able to save the Philadelphia taxpayer millions of dollars by just a little sweat equity. Mind you, this was all during the time in which my budget was being decreased by millions of dollars. So anything's possible if you have some ingenuity and some sweat equity. I share that with you because part of the reason I want to go to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is that all the good things and the programs and the accomplishments that I have in my county, I'd like to take for the rest of Pennsylvania children and families, or at least have a say or an input. The Supreme Court sits 6 times a year, 2 weeks in Philadelphia, 2 weeks in Harrisburg, and 2 weeks in Pittsburgh. The rest of the time, it has a huge administrative responsibility pursuant to the Pennsylvania Constitution. Having a quarter century of trial experience, both as a trial lawyer and a trial judge, then a trial lawyer and judge should sit on the Supreme Court to review the cases that are necessarily a review of what transpired in a courtroom. People would say, well, how would you like that? Or why would you like that? Well, you have to remember, coming from a very, very big city with hundreds of cases, each day, every day, I had to make a spontaneous decision with a quick knowledge of the facts and an application of the law. And if that decision I made was ever challenged, I had to articulate that in an opinion. Going to the Supreme Court, I would be one of 7. It would be a wonderful experience to be able to have intellectual debate and thoughtful dialogue with 6 others regarding the direction of an opinion, as opposed to making it by myself or in conferring with one law clerk. Coupled by that fact, I really believe that the whole administrative aspect of being able to help Pennsylvanians really, really is attractive to me. So in regard, I believe I both have the qualifications as an administrator and as a jurist, and a proven record of accomplishment to be a successful Supreme Court justice.
How do you intend to repair the reputation of the court?
Well, unfortunately, the court's reputation has been sullied. I'd like to believe, and is a noble institution. I think first and foremost that there will, the election of 3 new justices will ultimately bring closure. But the reality is that there needs to be more transparency on the court. There are internal operating procedures that need to be published so that people have an understanding. As I said, as I traverse the state, many people don't read a number of times. Why? Because the majority of the time, it has to decide which case it will accept and then have a discussion amongst the colleagues and then prepare for those cases, all the while following the Constitution's administrative and supervisory responsibilities of appointing members to the various panels or committees which help create the rules to get us into court. So it's an interesting dichotomy of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's well worth pursuing. We can also bring guys, usually in person, and they get to speak to us. And then I guess they can lean on their own personal background to determine whether we're being sincere or phony. I think that's really important because most people don't realize ultimately the authority of a judge. Right now, what I find most disconcerting is more people are concerned about the presidential election next year, yet don't realize that a week from today, there's an incredibly historic election. I don't know whether you've been informed, but this is the first time in 311 years that we've had 3 vacancies on the court. The last time this happened, William Penn was the governor, and the monarch of England decided who should or should not sit. Now it's up to the voters, yet there appears to be some apathy. Most people don't realize that when you elect a judge or a justice, you're giving that person a pen. With that pen, they could take a child of yours in a custody case. They could take your home in a mortgage foreclosure case. They could take your freedom in a criminal case, and God forbid they could take your life in a homicide case. But most people don't even know who the judge is until they stand before one, and then it's a little late. If that pen is given to the wrong hand, it's incumbent upon a compassionate but directed Supreme Court to listen and make decisions that really can correct wrongs. That you also have to understand that the cases that the Supreme Court selects not only has a direct personal life-altering impact on the parties before it, but it also chooses those matters which have long-term practical implication that's going to affect not only us as citizens of Pennsylvania, but everybody who's going to come in Pennsylvania here and after, meaning our children and grandchildren, God willing.
What qualities would you bring to the court to help toward the goal of restoring the court's reputation?
Well, I think as I said, the practice of, or I should say, what we witnessed on that Supreme Court was human frailty, personality disputes. I think you need to have a very collegial personality and a even temperament. As I've indicated to you, I have served as the head of the family court system and now head of the entire trial system in Philadelphia for almost a decade, when my order read for 3 years. I have to believe that it's my ability to work with 25 other judges in family court and bring a dysfunctional court system and make it have a national reputation for being advanced in diversionary programs and transparency. I think that is essential, coupled by the fact that for 15, I'm going on 15 years of serving as a trial judge. I've had a reputation in my own county as being very fair and even-tempered. Isn't that what we're looking for in any jurist? The one branch of government in which fairness is absolutely essential is the judiciary. When you walk through a courtroom door, we're supposed to leave our wealth, our gender, our nationality, and our biases at the door. I'm not talking about the judges. I'm talking about everybody that comes through. We're to listen to the controversies, and we're to make decisions on a fair and level playing field. That's what I think I've done in my tenure as a common pleas court judge, and that will be the course of conduct that I continue to choose or will bring as a Supreme Court justice.
So on the email scandal, is there somehow the court could have handled that better, or do you think they handled it about right?
Well, I first and foremost, I don't know how to answer that question because I'm not privy to all the facts. And but what I could say to you is that the conflict that we have is in 1993, the Pennsylvania Constitution was amended to create the Court of Judicial Discipline as well as the Judicial Conduct Board, which would be the disciplinary arm for judges. And historically, that is how it has been. Also, you have to take into consideration that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court appoints the members to those two boards. Yet, just recently, we witnessed the Supreme Court issue a decision called In Re Bruno, involving a magisterial district judge. And that case indicated that the Supreme Court, pursuant to another constitutional provision, has administrative duties and responsibilities, that it can make its own decision. So I think that we currently have a conflict and that it has to be thoughtfully debated by the new justices with all the justices. And then the majority of opinion will bring that about. Could there have been some type of intervention? I don't know, because again, I'm not privy to the facts, and all I understand is what I'm reading. And I just wouldn't trust my decision involving someone's character or credibility based upon what I read without knowing the details.
Are you looking for the legislature? Would you be recommending that the legislature do something about the appointment you mentioned, the apparent, conflict of interest there?
Well, that's an interesting issue. I mean, we have a constitutional amendment which develops the creation of these bodies that are with the people that are necessarily to make these decisions. I believe that that's always open for debate and dialogue. But currently, what I would say is that the people who are placed on these boards, and it's very distinct as to who's to be placed on the board. It's in the Constitution that X number have to be lawyers, judges, or X number have to be lay people. And I think that's trying to be representative of the Commonwealth itself.
So who among Pennsylvania's past or current Supreme Court justices do you most admire and why?
Past and present. Well, that's a tough question as well. I have found many of the Supreme Court justices each have added a personal dimension to the court for the advancement of all Pennsylvanians. For example, we could go back to former Chief Justice Zappella, who back in 2002 authored a case which permitted same-sex couples, second parenting adoption, which permitted same-sex couples to adopt children. Let me share something with you. We have hundreds of thousands of children sitting in out-of-home placement, wishing they had a permanent and loving family. That one decision permitted many children to find loving homes. That's phenomenal, the impact of one decision. You have Justice Max Baer, who currently sits, who created the Office of Children and the Family in the courts, which as a result of not only streamlining a county-based process to be somewhat uniform, it too, as a result of good practice and procedures, saved Pennsylvania taxpayers millions of dollars. Yeah, then you have Madam Justice Deborah Todd, who just completed an elder task force. And it's a 300-page expose that shares with the court some of its direction as to how we can help our seniors in Pennsylvania. As a result, I just literally had a meeting with my own leadership in which we're hoping to interview and bring many seniors who are still eligible to work through a program to bring them into court to assist us in whatever credentials would permit, whether it's greeting people at the door, assisting people at a computer, or sitting in a courtroom directing people as to where they have to sit. I think that's the beauty of the court, that there is no one particular person. I just believe that it is a combination of distinct personalities and interests, and that's the beauty of the court.
Now let me try with the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you have a favorite past or present Supreme Court justice?
That's a hard question because, again, there are distinct qualifications or distinct decisions of each. So I would tell you, no, I do not. While I may have, I like the Justice Kennedy's even-temperedness. We've had many of the justices who helped create the foundation of our law, going back from whether it's William Brennan, Thurgood Marshall, even Rehnquist had decisions that I may have disagreed with, but it was a thoughtful decision, representative of his philosophy. Again, the problem with a political process is that people believe when you choose a political party that you're branded with a particular ideology. Yet judges are public servants. We're not politicians. So it's a little hard to say, do you have a favorite? Because it's almost as indicating, well, what did that jurist write? And can that be perceived as a left or right issue, as opposed to what were the facts before the court? What was the controversy? And how was the problem healed?
Do you believe that electing judges is the best way to select them?
Well, it's been an arduous process. And as I said, I believe electing judges has its benefits in the sense that judges will make decisions that will affect everybody's life that steps before it. You'll never have an opportunity to travel through the Commonwealth and actually meet people whether it's in Lancaster, Erie, Pittston, hometown Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia. You get to see the people, you get to talk to them. While we may be from different backgrounds or type of lifestyles, rural or urban, what I found is a commonality in everybody's desire to, have a sense of fair play for their children and their families. What I don't like about the political system is this concept that, again, as I indicated, you're broad brushed by the selection of your political party. Interestingly, in the Common Pleas Court race, I was permitted to cross file both as a Democrat and as a Republican. And I came in number one on both. Well, you obviously can't be right-minded thinking or left-minded thinking and come in number one on both tickets. The question is, do you think that I think like you? In a state race, you have to choose a party and you have to run on that party's platform. Yet, when you're dealing with the law, people would like to ask you questions that are law related. And as you may be well aware, we're bound by the rules of judicial conduct, that we're not permitted to comment. We may say our personal views, but if you give your personal view and it shows that you have a bias, then ultimately you're faced with a conflict if such a matter would come before you. I also don't believe in the concept of the money that is being entered. I think one of the worst decisions ever written was the Citizens United. I think that has tarnished the image of the judiciary because it permits, out-of-state interests and what we're labeling as the dark money to enter this race. I think a perfect system would be a combination of both, in which you have judicial elections that are publicly financed. To have court appointment is just politics in more of a secretive fashion. If you're leaving it up to politicians to select the members, let's not be mistaken. The politicians are permitted to collect money and are permitted to solicit funds. And it doesn't have to be shared. So at least with us, we file financial statement forms. How would you know which senator was funded by this person or organization to choose that person? I think we have a better shot at diversity, not only in our person, but in our way of thinking, by letting the people choose, since it's going to be our decisions that are going to affect the people's life. It's part of democracy. And at the end of the day, it's written in our Constitution.
So running under a party label is a new experience for you, a single party label, it sounds like, in a general election. How do you keep partisanship out of the appearance even of your decision making? How do you keep that from a decision maybe looking partisan?
Well, that's hard. I mean, that's the problem. That's how you do it, is by sharing your experiences, by sharing your accomplishments, and sharing your opinions that you've written or that you produce. And more so, since we're lawyers first and judges by good fortune, in a courtroom, you only introduce good character through reputation testimony. That's the law. I think in a judicial election, it's our good character through our reputation in our own communities that have to be investigated. As I often said, I've been blessed. People I've worked with and worked against, tried cases beside and tried cases against, sat in judgment of, and in leadership capacity, those who I've worked with, hired, or I worked for, I believe that they have been very candidacy, and that my message has resonated. And I think that's how I was able to make it through a very diverse and complicated primary. We had 6 judges running for 3 positions on the Democratic side, as well as the. It's not so much are you a Democrat or are you a Republican, youth, that I think like you. And as I share with you, I've shared with you my accomplishments, so I think it's pretty obvious that I truly believe that the court system is a product of good. I believe the robe that I wear, as I've indicated on some of my literature, truly is a beacon of hope, and just should not be a symbol of fear. I don't think it should be mocked like many of our TV shows that you see about the judiciary. I don't think it should be thought of as in a place where the hammer falls. Far too often, people think of judges as these mean-spirited individuals who just want to lock everybody up. And it kind of takes away from the whole concept of presumption of innocence, and takes away the concept of having an opportunity to be heard. Due process, most people don't understand it, but when you put it in human terms by you saying, hey, when you come into the courtroom, you have a right to say what you want to say and share your side of the story, as long as we follow these rules. And then after you're done, the other side gets a chance. And then you're going to be able to cross-examine each other or question each other. But at the end of the day, I have to make a decision. That's fair.
How do you define an activist judge, and what is your view of judicial activism?
I think an activist judge is someone who tries to step outside their jurisdiction and their authority. Legislation is written by legislators. Legislation should not be written by the court. How I perceive my job is to interpret the laws that are written and make sure that they're constitutional. I've been asked that question before, and the best way to summarize this would be to say that legislators create laws based upon the majority's will. That's why they were elected, hopefully, to share and create the laws that the people that elected them believe is essential. The court is there to protect the minority view, that there is always an equal basis, that majority does not always trump. That's the beauty of the division of the powers. And the court should stay in its lane, and the legislature should stay in its lane. Judicial activism is assuming that I was elected to make laws as opposed to interpret them.
Do you consider Brown versus the Board of Education to be judicial activism? And how would you have ruled on that case?
Well, we're not talking judicial activism. We're talking equal protection. You're talking equality in education for all individuals. In this regard, all Americans. That's not activism. Everybody's entitled to a free and appropriate education.
And how do you feel about an activist electorate? From what I understand, the turnout is not expected to be great. G. Terry Madonna of Franklin and Marshall College said if we get 20% turnout among registered voters in November, break out the champagne. Given that there are 3 seats, as you mentioned, up for election on the state Supreme Court, that's unfortunate. Who's responsible for that dismal turnout, and how do we correct it?
That's a good question. I don't know. As I said, I've been on a bench doing cases each day, every day for 15 years. I've not been really involved in politics other than exercising my right to vote. Do I follow it? It's always easier to be in the stands than to be on the playing field. I find it really unfortunate that, as I indicated, people could probably tell you the names of the presidential candidates. They'll tell you it's Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, or Donald Trump. But I bet you it would be hard for the average Joe or Jane to give you 4 of the Supreme Court candidates. Or if in your county there's a common pleas court race, to name some of the candidates there. Yet, as you heard me say, in January, after we're elected and or placed in office, you know what I could do with a pen. Yet a judge, I should say a president, a mayor, or a governor can't do any of the things that I described. Also, what's sad is that when you elect us, you're electing us for 10 years with a yes or no vote thereafter. So in essence, you could possibly give us a lifetime appointment. And despite the fact that this is what, the 50th anniversary of the right to vote, we're concerned that people aren't coming out. I don't know how to energize the base other than saying, let's not forget, people lost their lives and were abused for this right to vote. How can we take it so whimsically. I don't know. I wish we had that answer.
All right, so let's say I'm a voter and you've explained to me why a judge is important. I get that. But how do I choose between the 7 of you, given that you can't really talk about how you're going to rule because that would break the rules, and for good reason. But how do I decide among you? And I'll let you give a chance to, and then why you?
That's an excellent question. You have all good candidates. I know all the judges. They're all good and decent people. But they're going to have to make a choice. And ultimately, it's coming down to listening to us and deciding, are we playing quote unquote politician, or is this who we really are? You know, what do we have to hide? At the end of the day, we're all still judges. And should we not be successful, we'll return to our respective positions still doing good. I just think that having the opportunity to meet the people of Pennsylvania, shake their hands, look them in the eyes, and answer questions as I am with you, that they're going to have to go from their gut feeling as well as their own personal direction as to whether, again, the best way to describe it is, if you think that I think like you, then I'm going to ask you to vote for me. If you don't think like I think like you, vote. I just think when you're looking at and you have a good understanding of what the court does, if the Supreme Court is to interpret what transpired in the courtroom to decide whether there was something wrong with the law, with the facts, or with the sanction, who better than someone who has spent 25 years in a courtroom, who understands the nuances and understands the spontaneous decision and can judge credibility on the spot, should do that. Coupled with the administrative tasks, there's not a other candidate who can show or has a proven track record of accomplishments of advancing the health and welfare of those who use our court, simultaneously saving hardworking taxpayer dollars. Nobody wants to pay taxes, but if they're going to be paid and they're going to be used for court-involved programs, let's make sure, as I say, we get a return on our investment. Let's make sure that these programs are going to advance our youth and our members so that they become productive citizens. I believe in rehabilitation and education before incarceration and electrocution.
And how would you fix the special courts in Lancaster County, since that's where we are?
Well, I think specialty courts are important. As you know, the court needs to take a more holistic approach to certain issues. For example, in my own county, we had the juvenile treatment court. They handle substance abuse issues and alcohol issues. Many of the adults and many of the youth who get caught up in our criminal justice system really are carrying with them years and years of traumatic experiences, and they don't know how to release it, describe it, and many times they act it out. That's not necessarily a criminal act. What they did was wrong, but that doesn't make them a bad person. You have an opportunity to offer them treatment and therapy. If they're willing to accept, good for us. If they're not, we all know that incarceration is the ultimate penalty. When you're dealing with veterans courts, for which we have in Philadelphia, but they only accept misdemeanors, and I would love to work with Madam Justice Todd to expand veterans court to include felonies. Let's not forget, we're taking our youth, we're taking our young adult men and women, many right out of high school, because of the economy, they don't have a job, and we're giving them, and let's be candid, we're giving them a gun, and we're putting them on a plane, and we're sending them to the other side of the world to defend our country, which is a nice way of saying, you have to kill somebody for us. And when they come home, we salute them, we pat them on the back, we throw a parade. But once they take that uniform off and time passes, they may be ending up, as in a personal experience that I met one youth on this campaign trail who's living in his mother's basement. And every time he hears a backfire, whether it's a car or a siren, he kind of forgets where he is and he acts up. Or another young man who said he's not able to apply the trade that he mastered in Afghanistan to our workforce. And they're coming back with experiences because they've lost friends. Unfortunately, in my county, we have a lot of crime, and I see a lot of heartache. But some people don't see the kind of heartache they see in a war area. And when they're coming back faced with post-traumatic stress disorder, and they're defined as heroes, they feel as if they can't get the help that they need. So they self-medicate with alcohol and drugs, and then they get caught up. My comment is, hey, these guys and women have fought for our freedom. Isn't it now time to fight for theirs? Why are we putting them in jail? We're a system that there's a presumption of innocence. Yet, many people are sitting incarcerated because they can't make bail. Why is it that a socioeconomic decision should determine whether you're safe? When I ran the Philadelphia Family Court, I used GPS, global positioning, as a bracelet. What was costing me close to $300 to $500 a day to incarcerate or detain a juvenile, I was investing $6.75 in a bracelet in which I was able to track every 5 seconds. And it had walkie-talkie capacities where I could speak to the youth. And as a result, I was able to take a lot of people out of detention because the concern was not that they're a risk to themselves or to others, but there was a balancing act as to whether their right and their presumption of innocence should be trumped by protection of the community. Not only did we decrease the number of youth detained, but as a result of the monies that we saved, millions of dollars were able to be reinvested in our system. It's the right thing to do, but it just requires some thoughtful consideration and the development of some processes. That's the beauty of our system. I have to always see the cup as half full.
And what could the Supreme Court do to help specialty courts at the lower in the county?
Well, that's a good question. A perfect example is I'm Exhibit A. I was selected. I had to fly out to, or I actually drove to Pittsburgh to meet then Chief Justice Cappy and share with him what my vision for my county's family court would be if he would select me or appoint me. And after I was done sharing with him some of the concepts that I wanted to develop, he went back to the Supreme Court and they vested me with that authority. The Supreme Court has that power. My concern always is if we want access to the court to be equal, then there have to be decisions and rules made to get us into court. Far too often, when you don't have the ability to pay to file a petition, you have to file what's called an informa pauperis petition. But you still have to come to court to litigate that. And there are many times that individuals who are not able to pay a court cost don't have the money to keep taking public transportation to and from the courthouse to litigate these things. There has to be a better way. The beauty of this position is that we're able to think outside the box, reach out and have dialogue with the bar and to the public, things that I've done in my county to at least get a perception and a different opinion so that the Supreme Court, as the ultimate decider, can go back to its own and debate. If I was able to convince 25 other judges in family court and 70-some judges in the trial division, my chances of convincing 6 others are so much better.
Do you have any other questions? All right, we're going to ask you a fun one. Who do you want in the World Series?
I have to go Pennsylvania. Who you going for?
Well, I grew up in northern New Jersey, so I'm going to root for the Mets. But if being from Philadelphia requires you to root for the Royals, I wouldn't hold it against you.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I don't want to go against you, but on this I make the decision against you.
Well, thank you, Judge Dougherty. Is there anything else you want to tell our readers and viewers?
Other than thank you for permitting me to do this, despite our hectic and busy schedule in 1 week. I truly appreciate you, both of you, and the station for allowing me this opportunity. I really hope that you're able to reach all your viewers and that they truly, 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 in their heart, understand the significance and importance of this election. Not just this one, but every election. And maybe they'll learn a little bit more because you permitted them to hear us and make that decision. Maybe Terry Madonna's prediction will change as a result of LNP and you guys. The best I can ask for is an informed electorate and a vote for Kevin Dougherty.
Thanks very much, Judge Dougherty.
Thanks.
Thank you. So long.
How do I turn this off?